2 or 3 times higher than the same, right? So what do you do in such an instance?
Okay, so a number of things. And the first thing is you always want to go for the interview prepared in terms of market research. Okay. So you want to do your research and find out, I'm interviewing for this marketing associate position. You know, what's the, what are people being paid in the market? Okay. You know, different companies, you know, how much is that role, you know, paid? Right, yes. So that then when you go in, you have a rough idea of, you know, what to say. Okay. So you have to do your homework. You have to do your research. And I know sometimes when they ask you, so what is your salary expectation? Yeah. So what we normally advise is always throw the question back to the recruiter and say, so I know for this particular position you already have a budget, because you know before any position is put out there, the recruiter and the hiring manager, they already know, you know, how much they're going to pay for that particular role. Yeah. So I know the reason why the recruiters or the hiring managers would want to ask you is, you know, for some of them, of course, they are really concerned about their bottom line. So if my budget was 100,000 and Winnie, you came for the interview and told me, Mimi nataka 30,000, you know, maybe, you know, someone might say, let me just give her 50 because acha nimekuongezea hiyo 50,000. Yes. So always you want to throw the question back at them to avoid being undercut. But I think also, you know, as HR, we should, and I know it's something that is not very common, but we should normalize just putting the money out there. When you're putting out a JD, just say, you know, like how much, you know, you're going to pay for that particular position. But then, of course, we're not there yet. So always try and throw the question back at them. Some of them are going to tell you, others are going to still insist, I want a number. So you must go for the interview prepared to give a number. And you're thinking about the market research, of course. You're also thinking about, so me as Winnie, for example, you know, what is my value? You know, what skills, what special skills do I have? Maybe you could be like a fresh graduate, but you started working from first year. Sure. You have special skills. You have, you know, done certain certifications. You speak 3 languages. So factor in also the investment that you've done, you know, on yourself in terms of your education, your experience, and know what your value is. If, I always tell my clients, every time you go for an interview, have a number below which you can't go. You know, and this number, of course, for you to get that number, you've thought about the market, you've thought about the value that you're bringing, you've thought about your career trajectory, you've thought about, you know, when I go into this organization, what is, you know, the career progression looking like? What's the opportunity cost of me taking this job as vis-a-vis another one? Because sometimes you could decide I can take a pay cut because maybe I've been given an opportunity at NTV. Maybe it's marked, you know, in line with the trajectory of my career. And even if it's not paying how much I want, maybe, you know, I'd think that it's a good opportunity. So I'll take it and leave another job that's probably paying 80 because it's not in line with what I want to do. So a number of things, you know, you want to think about your career trajectory, you want to think about the market, you want to make sure you've done your research. Then when you're going for the interview, you're ready when they ask that question. Also, just practice saying the amount of money that you want. Because then I think sometimes imposter syndrome would would really make people kick in and make people just shrink and not say the number. So practice saying that number in the mirror. I want 80,000 shillings. I want 30,000 shillings. So that even if everyone in the room bursts out laughing, that's my value.
It does not hurt you.
Yes, and that is what I want. Because then again, you know, that fear that it's almost a taboo to negotiate.
Yes.
That because then you've spent so much time doing your CV, sending out applications, doing your LinkedIn profile, getting, you know, rejected here and there. So when that offer comes, it's like the first thing you just think, I have to accept. It's like, you know,
because
the way women think, when a man proposes, you have to say yes. And that's not it. You know, you can actually say no. So think about your value, practice your delivery, because then a big part of negotiating for your salary is how you you deliver the speech when you meet Ray on the panel.
Yes.
So when he tells you, like, for this budget, like the boss is, the budget is really tight,
And
we have 50, can you push back? Can you push back and say, okay, if you're not able to, maybe you went in saying that my expected salary is maybe 100,000, and then he says we only have 80. So go in with something else. If they're not able to get to 100, can they give you something else? Can they give you extra vacation days? Can you work from home? Can they pay for a certification? What else can they give?
They offer?
And then the last thing, the last thing, when you think about the number that you want to say, always add something so that then you're able to negotiate. So if you want 50, always say 70 to give room for negotiation. Because then also the employer would always give a low figure expecting you to negotiate. So he says he gives a low figure, so you need to give a high figure, and then now you guys can
meet somewhere in the middle. But then again, there's someone who said, but as we were never given room to negotiate, the feedback, they were like, you were mekuja, and then you're told, so this is what we're going to give you, right? So in such instances, then what do you do? Because it's like there's no room for negotiation. Either you take it or you leave it. And then again, like Joan said, maybe you've seen a lot of, rejection emails. So you're just like, what? At least that Almenita, at least they have offered. So in such a situation, what do you do?
That's a very awkward situation to be in. But I would say first thing is, have you brought up the conversation? Because the person saying that, it might be you are waiting for them to ask you whether they want to negotiate, and they'll never ask you. They expect you to be, as she said, the employer will expect you to negotiate. So if that conversation hasn't come up and you're discussing salary, you could politely, like the video said, politely ask whether there's room to negotiate or there's room to have a further discussion on the same. And when you're entering that conversation, I would say is, one, as John said, research. So if you come into that conversation knowing, okay, I'm going to apply to work in EABL, and I was in probably, let's say, Kenya Breweries before. And at KBL or at Qual, they used to pay me 50K for the same position, and here they're paying lower. If you come with that statistic that this is what someone at my level in this company is making, then that gives you a bigger, it gives you more leverage. So do research in terms of websites such as Glassdoor, PayScale. Do research with people who are also in your net, in the same position in another company or in the same company as well. And number 3 is also just ask around in terms of people who have senior positions in your family. You can have an uncle somewhere who's an MD, or he's a manager somewhere, or an aunt somewhere who's a branch manager, who might be able to tell you, hey, for that level, this is what on our end we get paid. So try and benchmark with this. So doing as much research as possible gives you an upper hand, and then trying to probe that conversation. Don't just accept. Try and see whether there's that room to negotiate. And as John said, always go in with the offer that's higher, so that you can, you can give that room to negotiate.